I think one of the craziest things about the witch hazel plant and plant motions in general is the time scale that they operate at. They either move too slow for us to see, so you do need a time lapse. You need to downsample the amount of frames you need to capture this motion. And then on the other hand, they move too fast for us to see, where we need high-speed cameras filming at 100,000 frames per second. Because a lot of times people see us as just kind of playing around and just filming things and come up with cool videos, but it's deeper than that. In reality, this is just kind of part that gets us into asking deeper questions and finding out really cool things about the world.
In our lab, we currently focus on extremely fast movements where energy is stored in advance and then the movement is propelled with that stored energy, and that's typically with a spring. When we want to understand a phenomenon, it actually helps to study it across a lot of different organisms and systems. We do have a habit in my lab of just seeing things in the environments around us and bringing them in to film them, and people who know us definitely bring us random creatures that are doing weird things. And plants are super interesting.
On my way to work, I picked up a couple of these plants and brought them into Sheila's office. Among the things I brought in, I had witch hazel, and I said, these will shoot their seeds. I had no idea how fast these seeds were being shot out of these capsules.
It turned out that the plant that Paul brought down with here was Hamamelis virginiana. This is the American witch hazel, and it's actually native to the eastern coast of the United States.
We literally walk past these plants every day on the way to the building and had no idea. And then Justin, being Justin, he immediately set up our high-speed video cameras and was like, of course we're gonna film this.
I mounted the fruit on a kind of a clamp and aimed it straight up. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and I'm pretty sure it hit the ceiling. And the craziest thing was that the seed and the motion of the fruit was kind of blurry. This basically occurs when the object that you're trying to video is moving faster than the frame rate that you're recording it at. And I was already recording at 60,000 frames per second. In fact, in order to capture the motion of the seed flying out of the fruit without any motion blur at all, you have to film at 100,000 frames per second. This is the same frame rate that I had to film to measure some of the fastest animal motions in the world. Some of these motions have an acceleration similar to a bullet shot from a gun.
It really stands out as one of the most anomalous species we've got in the shrub diversity of eastern North America. We have examples of many herbaceous plants that shoot seeds. Witch hazel is really unusual in that it's an understory shrub. Most of the shrubs we would see in this zone are developing bird-dispersed fruits. I knew that the family had other seed shooters in it, and from there we started wondering whether those plants were cultivated nearby, because they occur naturally in far-off places.
I went over to the Duke Gardens and I was initially asking them if they had any more Hamamelis virginiana, some of that American witch hazel. They told me they had it, but they even did me one better, and they said they actually had some of the other seed-shooting species in the witch hazel family. Specifically, they had Fortunaria sinensis and Lauropedilum chinense. And both of them are seed-shooting members of the witch hazel family, but vary in size. And I was curious what happens to, first, the speed of these projectiles when they're shot out. Essentially what I found is that the mechanism of launch is kind of similar to when you get a watermelon seed and you pinch it between your fingers. It's kind of like this pinching mechanism or the squeezing mechanism. So you have this structure that surrounds the seed, and as the whole fruit dries, it begins to open up. And as it opens up this way, the sides squeeze in this way. And that squeezing motion on the sides is what eventually ejects the seed and launches it out. In a lot of these really fast biological motions, they use a spring to generate motion. They don't use muscle, and of course with plants they don't have muscle. So what's going on here is that these organisms are storing a lot of elastic potential energy in these springs, and then all this energy is released at the point of launch. So we have a small, medium, and large projectile, And across these species, the seed mass to spring mass ratio changed all the way from 1/4, so the seed is 1/4 the mass of the spring, all the way to a 1-to-1 ratio, so the seed is just as heavy as the spring. Across all these ratios of seed mass to spring mass, launch speed remained constant. It was roughly the same at around 10 meters per second. I think it's kind of hard to grasp how crazy this is, so I'm gonna put it into a more human example. Your arm is roughly 5% of your body mass. So for me, in order to have a 1/4 projectile to launcher ratio, I would need to throw a basketball. Okay, in order to match the 1-to-1 ratio that we saw with these plants, I would have to throw a 6-pound bowling ball at the same speed that I just threw that basketball. That's pretty mind-blowing. How is this possible? We found that fruits that shot proportionally larger seeds relative to their springs stored more energy relative to their mass. I would have to have the exact same mass of muscle, but somehow something in my muscle would allow it to launch a heavier ball. For humans, I don't know how this is possible. For the witch hazel plants, I also don't know how this is possible. So far I've been talking about the launch speed. One of the big questions I had was how far do these seeds go? And I found that at the average velocity of around 10 meters per second, this seed would go 5 meters. This is really far for this tiny little seed to go. But what really shocked me was that when I let these seeds go off in a classroom, they went as far as 8 meters. So what is going on here? Why did these physics equations fail us? These witch hazel seeds are not balls. They have this kind of elongate shape and they spin. I was thinking of footballs and that the spinning motion was similar to a spiral thrown football. As the football is spinning, it tends to wobble. And these wobbles, besides making it kind of tough to catch, also apparently generate some kinds of lift. But the lift is not that significant. It would go only maybe 1 or 2 more yards farther. This is nothing compared to how far the witch hazel seed goes proportionally. So what's happening here? The witch hazel seed is much lighter and it spins at a much faster rate. And we found that as the wobbling increases, the amount of lift that's generated also increases.
We don't have much of the ecological underpinnings to really understand the mechanism and its adaptive value. What we might come away with is that the trait is old, and the trait is associated with a large chunk of this family, which means wherever they evolve, they must have evolved this trait, and all descending lineages still have it. So highly specialized. Why did it evolve? Where did it evolve? Those are questions that we really don't know.
From a broader beyond biology perspective, it offers us a really interesting vantage point for how we can use organic, three-dimensional structures and those tiny deformations in order to control and direct extremely power-dense events